The world is changing faster than you can imagine. The old systems are collapsing. Join us as we delve into the minds driving the future, the clean titans.
Yasmin, you began your career in the belly of the beast, working on coal-fired power stations, operations, and North Sea gas platforms. Was there a specific day, perhaps offshore or at Radcliffe, where the weight of the fossil fuel era hit you? Not as a scientist, but as a human living on a warming planet.
Not a single day. I would say it was more of a gradual feeling that grew over 5 or 6 years. So a bit of context, I was born in Iraq, Middle East. I grew up mostly in the UK, but I think for me that weight of fossil fuels and the impact that they have on a nation maybe was always within me somewhere. I was aware of that somehow in my subconscious. And I think that began to come out over the years. And what was happening around me when I was working in fossil fuels, I was beginning to learn more and more about climate change and questioning whether what I was doing was right or if I should use my engineering skills differently. I enjoyed working in oil and gas, so it was quite hard to leave. I liked the people, I liked the work, I liked the atmosphere, but I was doing, I in a way that I was made redundant from that company. I then started working as a control room manager in a heat networks business. So that was gas-fired heating mostly. And I loved the team and the work, but the atmosphere in that place wasn't quite right for me. And that was the moment where I thought, okay, I'm this stuff behind. And I quit my job. I didn't have another job to go to. I had about 7 years of experience in the industry behind me. And I thought I'll take a break and really think about what to do next. And that was really refreshing to stop and just start from a completely blank slate and be able to go on to do whatever I wanted. So not one specific moment, but more of a gradual progression.
Fortunate for the planet. In your book, Power Up, you describe energy as invisible until it fails. Based on your experience in Eon control rooms, managing heat for 25,000 people, as you just mentioned. What is one thing about the fragility of our grid that the average climate activist or politician consistently fails to understand?
I'll start by saying I don't have a problem with climate activists. I think we need people who challenge the status quo and challenge us to see things differently. But I do feel like some climate activists, maybe more so than politicians, have this idea that you can just switch off fossil fuels and continue living how we live today and don't quite understand how intertwined it is with modern society. And this is not how it works. We've developed the energy system over the past 150 to 200 years, and it's become almost like this living organism. It's very global and interconnected, and it's grown over time. And you just do that overnight. You have to change it bit by bit. And when you change one thing over here, you impact something else over here. So it's very much a systems problem as well. And as we adapt and we change for the energy transition, things aren't going to be perfect. And again, sometimes you hear people complain about certain climate neutral or carbon or low carbon technologies with ideological idea in mind. And I don't think that perfect solution exists. And just as a small example, maybe we have solar panels on their roof, which is fantastic. They then go away and do that. But as a result of that, the electricity networks businesses have to think about how that impacts the grid and how they adapt their wires so that they can take the excess electricity and manage that very different way of generating electricity to what we're used to. So I think we just have to always think about that interconnectivity and the history of the system that we have, and they're not going to change overnight.
True, and the fossil fuel and the old system is not just well interconnected, it's also well connected politically.
Yeah, that's true.
The chemical engineer, you view the world through flow reactions and thermodynamics. Is the energy transition primarily a chemistry problem, a physics problem, or a human psychology problem?
I'll give a bit of an engineer's answer and say it depends. If there were no humans around, it could be just a science or physics problem, but obviously we're here. We live on this planet, and therefore it can't be just a scientific problem. It stretches beyond the technical solutions to incorporate people and society. So it's very much a mix of all of those different things. And I like how we try to separate science from humanities. I think they very much belong together.
Let's turn to the roles of hydrogen and energy management systems. You led green hydrogen origination at RWE. There is a fierce debate about hydrogen being the Swiss Army knife of energy versus it being a distraction or just being hype. For heavy industries, where the hype and the thermodynamic necessity begin?
Yeah, it's a surprisingly emotional debate, I found, working in hydrogen. And it's surprising because you think these are all engineering professionals. They think about things very rationally. But I find there was a lot of maybe unrecognized emotion mixed in there. So I think the fact is, low carbon hydrogen is very expensive to produce. Therefore, we need to use it quite sparingly. And for me, the most obvious place where low carbon hydrogen makes sense is in chemicals industries where we already use hydrogen. So for those who don't know, fertilizers are produced from a chemical called ammonia. And this is a mixture of nitrogen and hydrogen. And at the moment, that hydrogen is produced in a very carbon intensive way. And we release somewhere around 10 kilograms of carbon dioxide for every kilogram of ammonia that's manufactured. So if you replace that hydrogen in those industries with a low carbon type, then you're immediately cutting emissions. And that makes sense. And then there are other sectors that are difficult to decarbonize. I think about aviation. We've got all these planes up in the air. We don't really know how we're going to decarbonize that. I think hydrogen could play a role there. Heavy goods vehicles where maybe batteries are too heavy. So sorts of places I think hydrogen makes sense. And it's really anything that's difficult to electrify. And I worked on green hydrogen. So you need electricity for that sector to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then if you're using that hydrogen to do something that you could have done with the electricity in the first place, then it makes sense to skip that middle step, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's me on I think.
Well, you could use all this excess curtailed wind energy in Scotland that's being wasted right now and turn it into green hydrogen, right?
In theory, yeah. I would be technically more challenging than that. So if you have an electrolyzer, it's a type of equipment that ideally you want to be running as often as possible, rather than having it sitting there waiting for the wind to be available or not. So there are some technical challenges that are definitely solvable, but come with a commercial challenge as well. So again, if you've paid X amount of money for a piece of equipment, then you want to be using it as much as possible so that you pay back for it as quickly as possible. There's that kind of stuff going on in the background.
Oh yeah, economics, right. While managing innovation funding for the UK government, you saw the under the hood failures of many clean tech startups. What is the most common reason a brilliant technology fails to bridge the gap from the lab to the commercial grid?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a variety of things that I saw, I would say, when I was working in government. One of the first things that springs to mind is around not properly understanding the target market or estimating how popular your solution or your technology is going to be, and not quite getting those commercial side of things right. So as you said, economics is everything in a lot of cases. So it's very important to get that right. And in some cases where these organizations didn't succeed, they didn't get the commercials right. Sometimes it was too much of a focus on the technical side, or to explain the benefits. So they had something absolutely brilliant, but just couldn't put that into words for the correct audience, or no effort on the marketing and the sales side, which sometimes you see with engineers. And this is why it's important to have multidisciplinary teams and bring in those skills that maybe you don't have yourself. And then sometimes it was just a brilliant technology, but the wrong timing. So maybe just too early. And as a society, we weren't quite ready for it. But I hope to see those technologies popping up again in the future.
Economics around the world.
Yeah.
You are currently leading a team developing an energy management system for batteries. Most people see batteries as simple storage boxes, but you're building the brain. How does software determine whether a multi-million-pound battery project is a financial success or a disaster?
Yeah, so what that you described that holds power doesn't really do anything without the brain. So it's a bit like a human. Here I am with my completely, I didn't have a brain to be able to operate myself. So the energy management system is the control system that allows it to respond to the needs of the grid, let's say, if it's a grid connected battery. So for example, if you have a wind farm that suddenly fails for some reason and unexpectedly shuts down, the grid system is now short of electricity to meet the demand that it's trying to meet. And that signal can be passed on to the energy management system of the battery to say to that battery, start up now, start feeding electricity into the grid to make up that shortfall. And then from a financial point of view, the energy management system can also respond to price signals or help to respond to those price signals. So if it's overnight and the electricity is cheap, then that signal can be moved to the battery to say, go into charge mode, let's charge up now and we can do it cheaply. And then tomorrow when electricity prices go up, we can discharge and make that profit margin. So this, that I would say.
Absolutely. You have explored energy landscapes across the globe, from wind farms in Denmark to solar in India's Thar Desert. If you had to pick one hidden gem of energy production, a technology or a specific project that left you in absolute awe, what was it? And why aren't we talking about it more?
The exploration is definitely good fun. Some of it I did in person and some was through interviews with people, and all to build up the stories for the book, for Power Up. I think the places that I visited in person left more of a mark, probably for obvious reasons. And I really Kraken Power Station in Scotland. It was truly awesome, I would say. It's a type of battery, so ties into the conversation we just had. It's a pumped hydro station. So there's a lake at the bottom of the water is pumped uphill from that lake into a reservoir. And again, that's done when electricity is cheap. The water is stored in that reservoir. That's kind of there. And then when the electricity is needed, the water is allowed to flow down a pipe. So we use, or not we, but they use gravity there. And that water flows through a turbine that generates electricity. But it's a hidden gem, literally, that's hidden inside what's effectively a hollowed out mountain in a very landscape, rolling hills, water. It's really very pleasant to be in that environment. And I remember went to visit, we drove through very small and dark tunnel to get into the turbine hall. And that tunnel was hand drilled and blasted with explosives. The whole thing was developed back in the 60s and was opened in 1965 by Queen Elizabeth II. So it was quite a big time. And then at the end of the tunnel, this small dark space, you turbine hall, which is a massive area, I said, in the middle of this mountain, and most people have absolutely no idea that it's there. And it's hard to describe the feeling of seeing that bright turbine hall and that contrast, and then thinking about how long it's been there and how much support it's given to the energy system. And then that section of the power station up at the other end, we went to look at the reservoir that holds the water, and that was so beautiful. And I remember, I think a few months later, I was watching a TV show, which is a kind of a TV show. I've seen it, and they actually filmed one of the scenes at that reservoir. And I remember thinking, oh, I recognise that. I've been there. That's not space, that's Scotland. Yeah, I think real hidden gem. They have a visit and they do public tours. So if anyone is ever in that part of the world, I'd recommend it.
I know they've taken up all the places in the world where those kinds of plants can be built because of all those geographies are taken already.
There is still some potential. I wouldn't say all of that geography is taken. So there is a little bit still to explore.
Hopefully. And you've noted that many people barely notice the energy that shapes their lives. How do we end this energy blindness without making the public feel guilty or overwhelmed by the scale of the crisis?
For me, really exciting industry. And I think maybe as an industry, we don't communicate that excitement so much. We communicate it more as a boring industry. People think, oh, it's kind of dull. So I think, for me, I think we can tap into that sense of curiosity and wonder that exists in people and get them excited about the infrastructure. So like for me, moments in my life where I pass a solar train and I'm looking at it, imagining how long it's been there, how much it can generate, what it's doing for people's lives. Or I hold on to memories of when I went to see Rampion offshore wind farm, which is on the south coast of the UK, and it was a really nice sunny day and just incredible to be up close to these offshore wind turbines. They're huge. It's difficult to imagine until you're up close to them. Or a hobby now is when I'm to look out of the window and look for energy infrastructure, so you can see offshore wind farms in the sea, or you can also spot coal and gas-fired power stations over Germany. I've some of those before. So I think my plan is to share my enthusiasm and hope that it's infectious somehow and it makes people interested in energy. And I think up that curiosity, then people will do their own research and their own learning.
I know I was going from San Diego to the San Jose Bay Area in California, and I could see from the plane these massive solar farms in the desert all over California.
It's very cool, right? It's like...
Yeah, you've worked the UK, Turkey, and Germany. Is there a cultural spirit to energy? Does a German engineer look at a wind turbine with a different philosophical lens than a British engineer looks at a North Sea rig?
Maybe not an energy. I suppose it applies to energy as well, but engineering spirit, I would say the theme that I've witnessed is around being part of a team and collaboration. So I haven't worked in many other industries, but I hear places like finance, it can be competitive and maybe a bit backstabby. I don't know how true that is. Or like that can be less of a team effort. And to some extent in the energy sector, I personally haven't seen a lot of it. And for me, it's always felt like we have to pull together as a team towards a common goal. And in oil and gas, we worked on very large, very expensive, complicated developments that were in the middle of the sea. So you're dealing with deep water, crazy weather, all sorts of other challenges, and there's not really time to be other. I think there's a realization that this is a big thing that you can't do alone, and I see the same now in my work. So I work mostly on the battery software stuff. We've got software developers, front-end developers, network engineers, database engineers. Everyone is specialized in their own skill set, and they rely on each other because they can't achieve what we're trying to do by themselves. And I really like this kind of atmosphere where you can trust and rely on each other. And for me, that's quite a globe, well, from countries that I've experienced.
The captain's chair. You were the captain for the University of Nottingham's on University Challenge that requires extreme mental agility under pressure. How has that competitive curiosity served you when negotiating complex multi-million-pound green government projects in the boardroom?
I don't competitive. I think I'm competitive. I also don't do very well under pressure. I originally, the careers that I considered was being a doctor, and I'm not sure how I would have fared in that very intense pressure environment. So I might take myself down into a state where I don't feel or see the pressure anymore. And that is doable, I would say, in engineering. On University Challenge, I was able to do that by telling myself like what it is. It's a game and it's a bit of fun. So I wasn't putting pressure on myself to be a winner of a TV show. But when it's work, I try to use that same approach of staying calm. And I always think, going back to the doctor analogy, I think we're not doing brain surgery right now that, that we're dealing with can wait. So we can spend time considering options and responding calmly. Not in every situation. Sometimes you do have to do something quite quickly, but most of the time you have that luxury. And I try to lead my team as well to keep everyone calm and clear-headed so that they can make rational decisions rather than rushing into something.
Yeah. As a trustee of NMITE, you are reimagining engineering education. If you could delete one thing from the traditional engineering curriculum and add one human or soft skill, what would that be?
Let me is first. So NMITE is a new engineering university in the UK, and the whole idea is to create work-ready engineers. So they don't have any lectures, and they don't have any exams. Everything that they do is project-based, and everything that they do is based
on... So it's all hands-on.
Or industry problems, a lot of industrial partners who supply the challenges that the students work on. It's similar to Olin, I think, in the US, or there's a similar concept in Canada called Quest, if I'm getting that right. But it's that, like myself, who come out of university with not very many practical skills. So I think if I look back at my own chemical engineering degree, my memory is spending so much time learning about distillation columns and the calculations of how they work. And I never ever used that in my life after my degree. And I know that it probably taught me some useful skills, but I really would have preferred to learn those skills doing something else that was maybe more applicable later on, because I wasn't going to go on to work in a refinery. And that's like wasted time somehow. It really put me off my studies. And what I might go for things, if that's okay. One, it's psychology, how you cooperate with other people, how you negotiate, how you compromise, those sorts of people skills. But picking up on something that we talked about earlier, I would also add that finance and commercial side of things. I think, unfortunately, money rules the world. So it would help engineers to have a good grasp on that from the get-go. And I think we all eventually realize that this is a skill that we need. But if we have it earlier, I think that would benefit us.
The Women in Tech Paradox. You were named one of the top 50 female engineers in sustainability. After 15 years in the industry, have you moved past the tokenism phrase, Or are we still just scratching the surface of true cognitive diversity in the energy sector?
I like this phrase, cognitive diversity. I think I look at the numbers of female engineers in the UK engineering sector. We've made a little bit of progress, but not too much. So in the last 15 years, while I've been working, we've gone from 12% to around 16% females in engineering. It's not great. I think we are just scratching the surface, and I don't think we're past the tokenism phase. I'm also not convinced that organizations fully understand how to go beyond the characteristics that are easy to see and measure. So you can measure ethnicity and gender, but that real cognitive diversity, as you put it, is a lot harder to do and that you're doing. And I think we have a long way there.
Moving on to the 2050 lens. If we are sitting here in 2050 and the transition was successful, what was the great pivot we made in the late 2020s that made it all possible?
Similar to my answer to the first question, I don't think there was one great pivot moment, and we make steps in the right direction. And I know at the moment it feels like we're not making progress, but I think we are. And I think the stuff we're seeing right now in the growing ambitions, I hope is a blip. And when you look at the overall trend, looking back from 2050, I hope that we will just have continued to move in the right direction and to chip away at this energy transition consistently and transform our energy system to whatever it becomes in 2050. Or something, maybe a pivotal moment was a complete, enormous environmental catastrophe that then forced us to change very, very fast. I prefer the first one though, personally.
The old titans, what happened to the coal and gas companies you once worked with? Or if you look at in 2050 future, did they evolve into the new titans, or did they simply vanish from history?
I'm optimistic. So I say they evolved. And we have seen evidence of this happening in the past. So we have seen the likes of BP and Shell dipping their toes into renewables quite successfully in some cases. And I don't see why they can't adapt. And I think that's a benefit. They can bring that wealth of knowledge and expertise that they have to the future energy system.
But sometimes they abruptly take their toes out of the...
They at the moment, but hopefully they put their foot in next time.
But they can't, the agility and how future and forward thinking of an octopus energy or a kraken, right?
True, but I mean, I work at quite a large company and is definitely moving in the right direction. So I think it is possible. Might just take some time. I think it would be a shame to lose that as in the expertise of those organizations. So I'm rooting for them to join us.
Kodak was universe in year 2000, and 13 years later they disappeared, but all their people, they went on to do other things.
True. Yeah. Which, I will not lose people. So that's a good point.
Clean Titans is about stories that change the course of your life. For the young engineers or students watching this who feel like the climate problem is too big to solve, what is the first chemical reaction or small action they should start in their own life today?
I think I struggled with this too, and do struggle with it, this feeling of being overwhelmed. But I would say have a long journey ahead of you. Let's say for some reason you have to walk thousands of miles. It's best if you take that first step and think about that journey step by step. If you stop and think about the thousands of miles or kilometers ahead of you, you might overwhelm yourself and then just not even start and give up before you've taken any steps. And I think the climate problem is a bit like that. It's very big. You can't solve it by yourself, and it's not going to be solved in a few days or years. it will take time. So I think if you take some small steps alongside others and make a difference, even if it's something small, and that could be making sure that you're voting in elections and paying attention to what the climate and energy policies are of who you're voting for. Could be working with local energy groups, or my favorite option is to take up a career in the energy sector, and that doesn't have to be as an engineer. You could be in finance or in communications or in legal or in any profession.
Well, thank you so much, Yasmin, for your time. You're a true clean titan.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, please like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends about Clean Titans. We have such amazing people telling us amazing things that can change the course of young people's life.
The insights and solutions we discuss here are crucial for a cleaner future. They're about a fundamental shift in mindset. We believe that interviews like this are so profound, they can change the course of your life. If this conversation moved you, hit that subscribe button to join the community that's building the sustainable future. Thank you for watching. Like and tell your friends about Clean Titans and consider supporting us on Buy Me a Coffee. And we'll see you next time on Clean Titans.